Yeah, let's talk about a bank that should be put under some scrutiny, which is Badger DAO, which faced a $120 million exploit yesterday after the front end was hacked by an anonymous party, still unknown. A lot of the details of this hack are still coming out. Happened last night around 9 p.m. And it looks like from some of the investigation details right now that the hack was actually ongoing for a few weeks. Basically, what entailed here is a little bit different than the last DeFi exploits we're kind of familiar with. This is a front end hack where the interface that most people come to when you go to Badger DAO and you're going to deposit some tokens, maybe get some yield, take out a loan or whatnot. That part of the protocol was hacked. Nothing on the back end, none of the smart contracts were hacked, but something on the front end. This means that people who don't really know what's going on with front ends or probably don't really understand how these systems work and had like their parameters set insecurely, had their funds drained. So we saw about 2,100 Bitcoin and about 100 Ether stolen. And right now, I'm not really sure where those funds are, but it doesn't look like they're getting them back. It doesn't look like this is a white hat hack attempt either. Zach, I'm going to throw this to you. This is, we've seen a lot of DeFi hacks over the last 2 years now, but I don't feel like I've heard of one in a few weeks or a few months.
Yeah, it has been a while. And this one is certainly sizable enough to sort of capture people's attention, even though it broke kind of overnight. I think it's going to be interesting to see if it kind of turns out into one of those pivots to white hat, like we saw with the Poly network hacker, right? Like when you try to liquidate these stolen funds into something that's usable, the community is pretty quick to identify, flag, and sort of add friction to these wallets. So it's going to be interesting to see if there is sort of an about face where it's like, oh yeah, I'm just testing the code here, just making sure that these exploits aren't exploitable. So that's still a possibility. But yeah, it has been a bit quiet on the DeFi exploit front in recent weeks. You're right, Will. So interesting to see that this one has brought us back to this conversation. And I think at its core, again, this conversation comes down to DeFi, even though it's like $100 billion sector, is still rather experimental, and there's still it's still a bit porous. So whether it's I think it was like a MetaMask exploit in this instance, or whether it's something at the protocol level, there's ways to game it in such a way that people who have the skills to do so can make off with quite large sums. So interesting to see this one. But yeah, it's gonna be curious to see what happens now. That's what's next.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So there were some interesting reports on Hacker News talking about this. I like the comment from PJC50, who said that, a reminder that every DAO is a self-administering bug bounty for all the value under its control, which is an interesting way of looking at this. And it kind of does play into this. Is this a white hack? Is this a black hack? Because it could be turned into a white hack potentially by giving a portion of the funds, and then they disclose the bug. They close that up. So it's like this perpetual like honeypot that's sitting there for people to try to find the exploits, and they can either get rewarded by taking these illicit funds and trying to put them through something like Tornado Cash or some sort of like mixing program or something else, or they can report it and potentially get a reward from it. So we'll see which direction this goes in. The other thing that I'll mention that PJC50 also brought up, which I thought was a good point, is that you don't have to hack Ethereum. There are plenty of spots more vulnerable than the blockchain itself, which value can be stolen. And it is interesting because seeing all these DAOs pop up, seeing all these like treasure troves with a big target symbol on them, if we're talking about this interesting game theory that is protecting the network, this interplay of technology, but also game theory, a lot of people in the early days were very dismissive of Bitcoin, the idea of cryptocurrency, because they were like, no, this could easily be gamed, but the incentives just weren't there, right? And now that we have all of these DAOs built on top of this, we have these much easier exploits to target. It just is further entrenching, I think, the stability of a lot of these blockchains, because people are targeting these DAOs on top. They're not actually, targeting the underlying blockchain. They're not trying to undermine the foundational rails. So I think that's a very interesting.
Yeah, totally. And I think I want to bring up one point that I've been kind of seeing all over the place, which is this idea of Web3. And I think it's become really like a buzzword over the last 6 months. Like every VC is talking like Web3, Web3, Web3. And then Bitcoin maximalists on the other side are saying like, you can't even define Web3. What is it? And I think this is a great instance of showing like where the rubber hits the road. Web3 is this idea where you put money and the internet together and you're able to do a lot of things that previously were unattainable. Take out a loan, send money to someone through your browser, stream a YouTube video while paying for it at the same time. And on the other side, like that's great stuff, but on the other side, it's still extremely insecure. And we're seeing a lot of these hacks. And I think the value of these hacks over the last 2 years, like it's been a pretty tremendous number, well into the hundreds of millions of dollars, if not into the billions of dollars. And that's nothing to wink at. And that's really catching the eye of some regulators as well. So I think it's just an interesting moment to look at some of these hacks and say, this tech is still in production, as I say, test and prod. And it's not there, but there is probably something there for the long run. Zach, I'll give it to you though for closing thoughts.
Yeah, DeFi is still really potentially transformative, and yeah, I think it's honestly a big part of what VCs sort of sounding the Web3 drum are really talking about, right? These financial services that are internet native that work pretty well when they're not hacked. So that's the thing that I think like is still going to be an open question, and I think it's going to absolutely inflect the regulatory conversation around how the CFTC or the SEC or others are going to view the DeFi sector through the lens of consumer protection, right? Because you see these big numbers pop up and you say, oh, someone on some mom and pop investor is on the losing end of this stick in some future scenario. I don't think that's necessarily the case right now because probably a lot of these protocols are used by pretty savvy folks. But at some future iteration of the Web3 drum being sounded by every VC on earth, these are things that are going to be used by mom and pop investors the world over. So thinking about how to regulate that in a way that brings some degree of comfort to regulators in DC and beyond, it's going to be really interesting to watch. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the Badger DAO thing. I saw Tornado Cash just went live on Arbitrum. So now it's cheaper to wash this money potentially. So, hey, maybe it's just a celebration of that, but check that out. All right. Anyway, I think that's it. Actually, we're going to wrap the show. We're going to wrap the hash for today. The hash is over. That was the hash. I'm Zach. We got Will. He's our mining, he's like our mining expert,
expert on everything,
guy.
Zach.
No, yeah, there you go. For sure.
Our general expert.
We got Jen, who always has her finger on the pulse of the culture and always is.
I think Naomi's muted.
I think she's always. Sometimes she's sad about sad stories, but oftentimes she brings insight and research to the table. Naomi's muted.
Naomi's
so
the chatty one.
Whatever I want.
Yeah,
Naomi loves
the chatty one.
She's really
with bad coin takes.
Activist, government, and consumer protection, and she
loves Bitcoin maximalists.
And she hates. Oh no, she's back. Oh, she's back.
Oh, you shouldn't have said anything.
Here we are.
You shouldn't have said anything.
Appreciating 10 seconds of my life, guys.
That was intense. Anyway.